Around Halloween of 2020, out of curiosity, I began to look at local ghost legends. I live in Iowa, and although I had heard of many of the ones I came across already, one in particular stood out to me. At the time, I looked into it a little bit, but I ended up putting it on the back burner. But now, as we approach Halloween of this year, I wanted to revisit this and research it a little bit further, and what I found was pretty interesting. So, I've organized the sources I found on this legend in roughly chronological order, and as we backtrack this legend to what I believe to be its source, I'll show you my process. The most recent source I found on this comes from ghostquest.net. It says, at the Springbrook Trail of Urbandale, the following legend is told. Springbrook Trail is said to be haunted by the apparition of a man called Uncle Charlie, whose appearance resembles that of a corpse. His face is rotten and decaying, and his clothes are in tatters. His apparition is often seen running through the woods at night, and his specter frequently shows up in photographs. Additional research for this allegedly haunted location is currently in progress. Now, I found this to be rather fascinating because I've lived near Urbandale for most of my life, and neither myself nor anyone else I knew had ever heard of this before. I did not find any further research from this source on this legend, which is fine because I have other sources available. Now, on the page itself, I didn't find an actual date for it, so using the Wayback Machine, I was able to trace back the first mention on that webpage to August 14th of 2020. But we can go back considerably further. The next most recent source comes from TPKs Stories. Their page, Iowa Urban Legends, says essentially the same thing. If you scroll down that page, you'll come across this entry. Now, note this photograph because we'll be seeing it again later. It says, Urbandale's Uncle Charlie. Supposedly in Urbandale, there is this ghost named Uncle Charlie, who you can find running through the woods at night. They say if you take a picture with the flash on, he will show up in background, looking ghostly and gruesome. Okay, essentially the same story as before. Scrolling even further down this page, I found that this was published on October 8th of 2019. So, close to Halloween. Looking at the source itself, this page is written by someone that calls themselves TPK, who says they are a 55-year-old divorced mother to a 25-year-old guy. I like stories from fiction, fan fiction, and inspirational stories. I also like inspirational, paranormal, supernatural, and true crime stories. Also worth noting is that this appears to be one article in a series of articles on urban legends from different states. Interesting. We can go back even further, though. Now, this next most recent one comes from a blog by someone named Tallulah Jane. I can only assume this photo in the upper right corner is them. They describe themselves as, I aspire to do great things, but don't do anything to get there. Okay, fair enough. This particular page is titled Ghostly Things Tracy and I Must Someday Investigate. Not sure who Tracy is, but this was posted on February 8th of 2017. Kind of interesting because it's not near Halloween at all. This article writes, Urbandale is home to a ghost named Uncle Charlie. People have reported seeing him running through the woods at night. It is said that if you take a picture with the flash on, he will show up in the background, looking pale and ghostly and terrifying. People have also reported seeing his face peering into their windows at night. And then she adds a note that says, this one is kinda random. Would we be trespassing? Is this a residential area? WTF. Now, I have not seen this photo on the article featured anywhere else. At first I thought it was a photo of the Springbrook area, but I don't think so. I'm not sure what the source of it is, but I did a reverse image search and there were no other sources for it. So I guess this is a photo that they had taken somewhere, but it doesn't resemble the area to me. Going back even further, I found this source called the Tiger Highline Online. Again, it's featured on a list of Iowa's oldest haunts. Check out the Coolest Ghost Stories, published on October 28th of 2016. So, another Halloween article, or listicle I should say. The entry here reads much the same as the others. In the woods of Urbandale late at night, anybody might be able to see Uncle Charlie. He is a spirit that has reportedly been lurking in the woods, and if someone takes a ash photo in the woods, I suppose that means a flash photo in the woods, people have seen him hanging out in the corners of the pictures. He is described as a man with a translucent body, but with a flesh-eaten face. Deep in the night, people report sounds of running in the woods, along with high-pitched screams. Okay, slightly different information here, but we'll keep going. Now, what is this Highline Online? Well, I did a little digging, and I found the following blurb. The Tiger Highline Online is an award-winning creation produced by the journalism students at Cedar Falls High School. We produce written, photographic, and video stories of the latest news around campus, as well as teen-centered topics from around the world. The content is created entirely by students, primarily from the newspaper, broadcast, and yearbook courses at Cedar Falls High School. And then they have an email address that you can contact them at. So this is essentially just a student newspaper. Nonetheless, it was an interesting publication, and yet another source where we've seen this story recounted. Now, this next source, Only in Your State, is a fairly big platform. I've seen articles from there on a variety of other topics as well, so I was kind of surprised to see it featured. This first article is from October 20th of 2015. Already we've gone back a handful of years from when I first learned about this story, so it's been around for a little while. The entry here has the exact same photograph as the earlier blog post. Here, though, they actually credit the person who took the photo, someone named Yinan Chen from Flickr. So this is not actually a photograph of the Springbrook area, it's just a stock photo from Flickr that they added as an illustration to their entry. Supposedly in Urbandale, there is this ghost named Uncle Charlie, who you can find running through the woods at night. They say if you take a picture with the flash on, he will show up in the background, looking ghostly and gruesome. People have reported seeing his ghostly, flesh-eaten face staring into their windows at night. Already we can notice a lot of repetition here. Some of these articles are merely copying and pasting what is written into their own listicle. In other cases, they very slightly reword it, sometimes quoting verbatim, and other times making more extensive edits. But this is not the only article from Only in Your State. There was an earlier one from 2015, this one on July 2nd. Here, it's described as an urban legend. So, urban legend, ghost story, essentially the same thing for our purposes. Once again, we see this photo used. Not a lot of new information in this article. Now, who was the author of both of those articles? Someone named Michaela Kendall. She describes herself as a born and raised Iowan. She writes for a newspaper by day and writes content for websites by night. In her spare time, she enjoys reading a good book or just binge watching Netflix. Seems like a nice enough lady. But she is not the original source of this legend. There's an even earlier one. This one is The Place of Scary, Haunted Places. In this one, there's a little bit more information. There is a legend told about this scary dead guy called Uncle Charlie. You can see him running through the woods late at night. An elementary school student saw a flesh-eaten face at her window staring. If you have a camera, I tell you right now, don't turn the flash on, because if you have the flash on, you will see a guy standing behind the thing you took a picture of. Late at night, You are the only one up. You can hear people running and screaming high-pitched. Sometimes you can feel cold, trembling fingers on you when no one is behind you. You have your covers torn off by nothing. This was posted by someone called John. Looking at the URL of this page, I can see that it was posted in September of 2009. I'm not sure of the exact date, though. But there's an even earlier source, and this one I believe is the original one. This webpage is called Haunted Places in Iowa, and as you can tell, it has a considerably earlier web development aesthetic. Of course, at the top there's this ad for some ghost hunting equipment, something called the Shield of St. Michael, and it's part of a longer list of various ghost legends from around Iowa. Since the list is in alphabetical order, the Urbandale entry is near the bottom, but this is, again, just a verbatim copy. The previous website merely copied this information, apparently directly. So let's look at this text, since it seems to be the earliest account on the internet of the story. Reading through it, there are a few things interesting to point out. You can see there's a lot of spelling and grammar mistakes. They don't capitalize things that should be capitalized. Their punctuation is kind of weird. And it explicitly mentions an elementary school student as being a source of this story. Using the Wayback Machine again for this particular source, I was able to pinpoint this entry being entered sometime between September 19th and October 11th of 2007. And the September 19th record of this webpage, it's not there, and on the October 11th one, it is there. Again, close to Halloween. Scrolling to the very bottom of the page, there's some contact information, so I figured I would reach out to them to see if they knew anything about what the original source of this story is. Maybe they knew someone, maybe there was additional information that wasn't on the web page. I figured it was worth a shot. We can see that there are links to add a haunted place, so this list appears to be something that was kind of crowdsourced in a sense. Anybody could come along and type in whatever their story was and it would be added to the list. However, the link is dead and it takes me merely to this page advertising hosting services. So I reached out to the email address on that web page with the following email. However, when I sent that email, I was told that the message wasn't deliverable because the address was not found. However, looking through the links on that page a little bit more, I found my way to the homepage of this website, which is the Shadowlands Ghosts and Hauntings. On that page, they claim the following. Hello and welcome to the Shadowlands. Since 1994, the Shadowlands has been dedicated to informing and enlightening visitors on such topics as ghosts and hauntings, mysterious creatures such as Bigfoot and sea serpents, UFOs and aliens, and many other unsolved mysteries. We have provided general information on some subjects and a bit more in-depth info on others as my time and experiences allow. If you read this pages with an open mind, you should come away with a better understanding of these mysteries. While all of these subjects are laughed at or frowned upon by many, we challenge you to at least take the time to decide for yourself. We have included text files, video, sounds, pictures, eyewitness accounts, and more on the pages that follow. We are always adding new information and update various pages on a monthly basis. We have also created a few pages to visit when you need a break from the norm or the studies here. There is something for everyone here, so take the time to look around the Shadowlands and stop back often. There's always something new. Thanks, Dave Giuliano and Tina Carlson. Well, this was good. I now have the names of a couple people I could also reach out to. However, after emailing them at the addresses that were listed on the page, I have not received a reply so far. So let's summarize. The main points of the legend, according to these various sources online, is that there is a ghost named Uncle Charlie who appears at the Springbrook area of Urbandale, Iowa, particularly in the woods. He resembles a corpse with a decaying face and tattered clothing. Some sources describe him as pale or translucent. He appears in the background of photographs, especially if taken with a flash at night. He'll also appear through the windows of houses. Also, he runs through the woods, and there are sounds of running or high-pitched screams to be heard. Furthermore, if you are lying in bed near this area, you may have your covers torn off by nothing. You may feel cold, trembling fingers on you when no one is around. And the first mention of this story is in 2007, but it's found in several publications afterwards. Considering that, according to legend, ghosts are usually the spirits of an individual person who has passed away, I looked at the obituary records for people named Charles and Charlie who passed away in the Urbandale area in recent years. There are lots of possible candidates here, but I don't think that any of these are very likely to be the Uncle Charlie ghost of. So, without many clues to go off of, I began to look at the Springbrook area of Urbandale. There is a street called Springbrook Trail, and wouldn't you know it, nearby is a wooded area. On the right, you can see Waterford Park. It has a stream and many trees growing in wooded areas throughout. Also, on the left side, you can see Radiant Elementary School. Okay, things are beginning to add up now. We have a Springbrook Trail street, a wooded area nearby, as well as an elementary school. So parts of this story are beginning to come together. Thanks to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, there is an online tool which allows you to see historic aerial photographs of areas since the 1930s. Using this, I was able to look at the history of this area over time. In 1930, the area looked like this. The names of the modern streets are overlaid on this photograph, but at the time the streets did not exist. You can see the stream and the trees of the area remain in much the same place that they are now. You can see that the area was mainly just crop fields and some woods. There are only a few buildings and not very many people lived out here. Using a somewhat more recent historic photograph, you can see much the same story. Some of the houses which were there are no longer present, and areas that were at one time just crop fields are now set aside as natural areas. Again, the modern streets didn't come until considerably more recent times. So, we've established that this legend was first recorded online in 2007, and there doesn't seem to be any historical reason for a ghost to be there. I mean, the area was basically just crop fields and woods for much of its history. I felt the only thing left to do was to go out and see for myself. I went one evening at sundown to Waterford Park. While I was there, I found this sign which shows that it's now a disc golf course. There's also information about an Oxbow Lake restoration project. We can see the contrast between the historical photographs and modern aerial photographs, as well as a before and after condition of the Oxbow Lake. It's good to see that there is environmental projects being undertaken. Using the flash on my phone's camera, I took numerous photographs. But in none of them do I see an Uncle Charlie or any other ghostly figure. While I was there were a few other people walking along the trails, but nobody in the forest. This particular photo is a little bit washed out because of how the flash went off. I walked around the area for roughly half an hour. It's not a large park and there were trails available, so I was able to get to the different wooded areas pretty easily. I even went a little bit deeper into some of the wooded areas, but I still didn't see or hear anything that the legend described. As it got darker and the sun went down, I continued to take photographs. A common theme you will notice is that the flash illuminates the area directly in front of me pretty well, but the light quickly dissipates, and if you look deeper into the woods, it gets considerably darker. I went into the area around the creek which runs through there, as well as through tall grass. But still I did not see anyone running through the woods, and I did not hear any screaming or other sounds for that matter. In fact, it was a pretty peaceful evening. It was nice to be outside, the weather was good. In fact, it was actually a nice walk through the park. The weather was pleasant that evening, and I saw some interesting wildlife. Some of my photos were a little bit blurry, perhaps because the wind was blowing the plants in front of me, or perhaps I wasn't holding the camera very steadily. Although I'm sure you could see whatever you wanted to in some of these photographs. Not all of the photographs came out very clearly, but still I didn't see anything that rather suggested to me a ghost. As it got darker, my camera wasn't able to capture images very clearly. I tried zooming in a little bit to see if there was something further away from my field of view. As I made my way back to my car, I turned back to see if there was anything that I missed. You can pretty clearly see some of the houses through the trees there. Although there are wooded areas, there's not exactly a large forest. So, for the heck of it, I went down Springbrook Trail. The area is now a developed suburb. It seemed like a peaceful, nice neighborhood. In addition to the photographs I took, I also took some short videos. One interesting thing that I learned while researching this video is that Waterford Park is part of the Walnut Creek watershed. In the summer of 2015, north of the Springbrook site, an interesting discovery was made. A chestnut lamprey, which had not been seen in the area since the 1890s, was discovered by an intern working on a water sample. This isn't exactly related to the Uncle Charlie ghost story, but I wanted to include it here as an interesting footnote. So, my hypothesis about this story is that it is a complete fabrication. There's no historical record of this legend prior to a website that accepts reader submissions with minimal, if any, curation or moderation. This story also has no connection to any particular history, and it leaves more questions than answers as far as who is Uncle Charlie? Why does he haunt this place? Who was the elementary student who apparently saw him? This story is also suspiciously generic. It's very similar to many ghost stories told in popular culture. Despite the claims that he appears in photos, I have not seen any photographic evidence of him. It would be one thing if some of these photos were present online where you could see this ghostly figure. I have not been able to find any. Instead, the photographs used to illustrate this story are usually just stock photos of forests. There are no specific people or records to reference. Who exactly experienced these things? So, in summation, I would say a child made this up around 2007. It first appeared around Halloween. There's very poor spelling and grammar. It references an elementary school student, and this is set in some woods near an elementary school. It's also worthwhile to note that around this time, creepypasta was very popular, especially among young people. In case you didn't know, creepypasta are horror-related legends that have been copied and pasted around the internet. Creepypasta has since become a catch-all term for any horror content posted onto the internet. These internet entries are often brief, user-generated paranormal stories intended to scare readers. They include gruesome tales of murder, suicide, and otherworldly occurrences. That sounds like a pretty good description for this story to me. So my final thoughts are as follows. This story is pretty much debunked, but there are some interesting things learned along the way. Contrary to what you may have learned in school, a consensus among sources does not necessarily indicate truth. I remember being taught that if I can find something correlated by various sources, then that's a pretty good indication that it's true. And while that may be the case for a lot of factual information, it's not necessarily always the case. Furthermore, a seemingly innocent bit of writing can take on a life of its own. It can be repeated many times over many years, and it would take a lot of work to find the origins of it. In this case, it's been copied on blogs, mainstream websites, even a student newspaper for more than 14 years by now. So all in all, don't believe everything you read. Thanks for watching. I've included the sources I used in the description in case you'd like to do more research.